Yes, that is Slapchop. So in this video, we are going to be hacking the fun and effective technique. We're going to be raising the effectiveness of it. We are going to be increasing the quality of the output, and we are going to be working on the versatility of the technique without changing its core principles, so you can apply it to more areas of more models and have more fun painting them. We will give a prize to the best and most liked suggestion to a follow-up video to this one. And yeah, just as a Christmas favor to us, please hit that subscribe button. Let's jump in. We are going to be looking at the Slapchop technique today. It's all over the internet. There is probably far too much content on it now. I arrogantly think this is the ideal follow-up video to any Slapchop content. I've been dry brushing a lot for about 20 years. So in theory, I should know what I'm talking about. This video is going to help you get more out of the technique without adding any time to it whatsoever. Going to introduce a couple of new concepts that are super easy, very approachable, anyone can do them. But if you do want to spend a bit more time, we're going to have some more stuff towards the end of the video, which is going to really help you level it up. And it's not going to involve changing the technique too much. We're not going to involve fancy edge highlighting. We're not going to involve an airbrush or anything like that. We're going to talk about things that stick with the core principles of the technique and just allow you to level them up with a little bit of understanding thrown in there. We put out a call on the social medias for people who had issues with or questions about the Slapchop technique. We got hundreds of them, literally hundreds. So we're going to address a lot of the issues you may be having or may have experienced with the technique, or things you think are kind of like shortcomings that you'd like to be able to cover the technique but you can't do. Metallics, for example. We're going to cover those in this video. It's a big topic. If you want like a 5-minute video where we just talk about the technique, paint a model and don't really help understand it, this is not going to be it. We are going to go for a very, very deep dive. Coffee. I made some pretty big claims there, didn't I? So if you can't even talk, not enough coffee yet. Okay, so why have I braved torrential November downpours in Manchester to go out and get coffee to keep me awake enough to do a good job of this video? Slapchop essentially is priming your model black. I should thank Rob for making the original video, shouldn't I? Sorry, rude. Thank you, Rob, for making the original video and bringing this to the masses. So Slapchop is prime in black. You then do a heavy overbrush of a light gray. An overbrush is a heavy dry brush. Following that, you do a light dry brush, just hitting the edges of the model with a white, and then you slap, chop, contrast all over it. That's it. Okay? So there are various videos out there, including the original, that you should definitely watch. Rob is more entertaining than me and can grow a better beard. We're both equally British though, I think. So that's great. I look more like the Hobbit. I've got that going for me. Anyway, so that's it. That's the technique. And what you get from that is you get very dark recesses. Then you get a mid-tone that isn't all the way to white yet, and your contrast will land on that. They will affect that according to how much bits stick out, how much bits go in. You know, more will pull in the recesses, it'll be darker here, and it'll be lighter here. That's how contrast works in general, not new news to anyone. But you're getting that going on in the grays, and on the very, very peaks of these areas, in the white bits, because you're dry brushing with a light dry brush of white has hit only the bits that stick out the most, you're going to get the least contrast collecting on them and the lightest color. Not the deepest in terms of saturation, we'll cover that, but you're going to get the lightest color there. So what you get is really dark recesses, a load of variation in the midtones, which is more than you get normally with contrast on the gray, and then you jump all the way up with a white and you get these punchy edge highlights, and you get something that looks fantastic, and it's really fast. The technique is incredibly simple and it lets the models work for you. And these days, computer design means that the models are designed to literally paint themselves almost with these materials, especially if it's a Games Workshop model. It's been designed with contrast in mind. Mainly the content creators who've covered the technique so far have added zenithal with an airbrush in there. That's a thing. That's actually probably the way that I would say I've used the technique for the last 15, 20 years when I've been speed painting my own armies, which have come out fairly well. That kind of makes sense. You are going to have issues with that though, because the recesses at the top of the model are going to have white in them. And if there's any issues with the new contrasts in particular, we'll have some pictures of my cabbage up here. It's that if you have white recesses, some of the wonderful colors like the yellow, Imperial Fist yellow in particular, stuff like that, when they pull in the recesses, they're just not quite dark enough. So I don't feel that the zenithal actually is the perfect solution. Now, the first thing that we're going to change is something that is free for you to change. It will add 0 time and it is unbelievably flexible. You can cater this to whatever idea you have for your army, and that is to change the color that you prime your model. you don't just have to prime black. You don't even have to prime with the primer. You could base coat it, whether that's with an airbrush or stippling or layering. I would encourage you to get it from a can though, if speed is of the essence. The nice thing is the type of colors you'd want to prime it. Mid-browns, you're gonna want everything to be a bit darkish. If you've got a color that you think is okay, but you want it to be a little bit darker, you can add a bit of black into it, super easy. Purples, kind of olivey drab colors if you want to do like a disgusting flesh. Things like a deep mustard yellow, that's quite popular. And what these are going to do is if you use those instead of a black, you've already involved color, that's going to lead to, you know, some interesting transitions or stuff like that. But if it's not as dark as a black, and then we dry brush gray over it, one of the easiest things about this, and this actually speeds up Slapchop, is that if you miss anywhere with that first heavy, the overbrush that I'm calling it, the first heavy dry brush of the light gray, if you miss anywhere, it just doesn't matter nearly as much because it's not a, you know, a really deep, you can't escape from black, it's black. It's really dark, it's black. You can't escape from that. If you dry brush your light gray and it's over something that's slightly lighter, it is so much more forgiving. So there's various colors you can pick. If you're painting your model gold or like warm or whatever, then I'd use warm brown or something like that. If you're painting something like icy, you could choose like a deep blue. There's tons of stuff out there. One quick consideration, if using a primer, don't use an ultra matte one. The Color Forge sprays, which are incredible, they're very popular at the moment, they're quite matte, so I would maybe avoid using those for this purpose. I generally go from Chaos Black and then I'll just paint it whatever color I want, or I'll find a primer that already exists. Non-matte primers are advisable for this. So very shortly, the middle section of this tutorial, episode, whatever it's going to be, we're going to start discussing dry brushing, and we're going to probably nerd out on that. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. I love dry brushing, I'm really into it. We came up with Series D to help people do higher quality dry brushing and the technique involved with it. So of course, we're going to discuss doing it at a higher level. Now, let's say, for my example, I primed it with a mid-tone, warm kind of reddy brown. I used Wordbearer's Red, it's a wonderful color. Let's have a little look. You can see here it's poked through in some areas. It's not the end of the world. If that was black, it would look quite bad. So it is faster and more forgiving to choose even a dark gray, but I like using colors. Now this first coat, this first base coat, slow it down a bit, just a tiny bit, and do it carefully. You're much better to hit an area, taking slightly longer, going slightly more carefully, and have some variation within that gray. It's not like it's either block black or block light gray, and then you just hit, you know, maybe the tips with a white dry brush. If you can get some variation in that gray, it will do incredible things for the quality of your paint job. A couple of tips on how to get a high quality dry brush. Number one, do not plow your dry brush right into the middle of your paint. Number one, that's awful. Like that will kill your brushes incredibly fast. Number two, if you can draw a line, dropper bottles are preferred, or scoop your paint out from a Citadel pot and put it on your palette. Use a palette as well. You can use a wet palette, but I'd use a dry palette. Put a line out and then sneak it off the tip, just the tip, with the tip of your brush of that line, work it around the head of your brush. And then number two, do not touch a paper towel with your dry brush. If you have a brush that has paint on it that's made from pigment and medium, and you touch it on an absorbent surface, more of the medium will be pulled out than the pigment. You'll be left with a pigment, which is essentially colored chalk. Hey presto, we've got chalky dry brushing. So we're not going to do that. What we do with our dry brushing is we involve a little bit of moisture and take a little bit more time. We remove on a texture palette, but you can use any non-absorbent surface. I would try priming it. Remove your paint on that and then take it to your model. Test it on that surface, and the default that I go for, you want to go across details like this. You don't want to go down details because you're getting the recesses. If in doubt, and this is generally the best thing, just go in circles, little gentle circles, and do that all over your model. You'll pick out things according to how much they stick out. You still do want to go for a heavy coat, but I would build it up over 2 steps rather than just going in there really heavy with a saturated brush with 1 step. That will affect the quality of your next step, which is the white dry brushing. And this might be where chalky dry brushing results are coming from, as well as pulling the moisture out and stuff like that. If you want more info on any of this, a couple of videos will be popping up now or linked below. And any questions are more than welcome. Super happy to help anyone out with it. So the white dry brush, it's the same stuff. Nothing's changed here. All dry brushing is the same. Use the biggest brush you can get away with because you'll get a higher quality result and they're more resilient. And take your time. It will go super quick anyway. Let's talk about paint choice now. So If you use like a not very well covering white, you will get a more subtle result. Doesn't mean the white is bad, you just will get a more subtle result. If you use a stronger one, you get a more harsh result. That's it basically, but people don't generally think about the paints that they're dry brushing with. You don't want to use ultra matte ones generally, especially for the grey stage. You can get away with them for the white stage. It's going to dry out faster and you'll end up with like little sandy peaks from the amount of white that's in the paint, and it's just harder to get a higher quality paint job with ultra matte paints. So I would use satin ones. Vallejo, I've used here. Citadel are super solid. For dry brushing, they actually do make quite a lot of sense. Now with the white, we're going to introduce a new concept here, which is stippling. So if you do traditional dry brushing, you just do it like this. That's going to hit the bits that stick out, the edges, the peaks. It's not going to hit any of the recesses. It won't hit any of the mid areas either, unless you've got more on your brush. If you've got more on your brush and your brush is a bit too wet, you're probably going to do what looks like bad quality dry brushing. So what if we have a mid area and we want to get more white on it because we want it to stand out? This is useful for flat areas. So this is very important for flat areas. I'll link a Star Wars ATST and some vehicles below how we've painted them, but I'll put them up on screen now. So as you can see, we've got a flat area here. We've had to decide to make it lighter on one bit and darker on another bit. Otherwise, it's just a flat area. The more detailed models are actually somewhat more helpful for this technique. That's why the Wall Crusher we did recently and the Dragon, they've got scales. It's a lot easier than picking, a big flat vehicle or some other model, like Nighthaunt, that's just like cloth, basically, and it's flat cloth at that, it's not even textured. So stippling is when you poke it. So rather than stroking, you poke. And with the use of stippling and your white, if there's a flat area, which is mostly grey, it's a mid-tone, and you want to bring it up, you can gently bring it up, and you'll do it in kind of like a slightly faded way. It's not big blocks, you're not putting down layers in stripes, it's a really forgiving way to bring an area up. If you do that, and then dry brush to catch the edges even more, you'll end up with some additional tones for free, and it will barely take you any time whatsoever. The white stage is super fast anyway. Let's say it took 5 minutes over, it probably took about 10 minutes on my Bloodthirster. If you go twice as long, it's only 10 more minutes on a model that's going to take a couple of hours or something like that, maybe potentially. So it's a really good investment of your time to carefully do the white stages. You can also jump to a super strong white. Where's my default? This is bold titanium white from Monument Hobbies. They come in a bigger pot, they last forever anyway. This is one of the strongest whites I've ever used. It does get a bit chalky, so you have to be careful, but you can even put a drop of that in with the white that you're using if you want something to really jump out on the edges. Another tip is to use off-white paints for your final step. You can use colour paints for any stage of this. It's easier to think in black, grey, white. It's much more digestible, it's less intimidating. But you could use ivories like I've got here. You could use a very light yellow. Anything that is kind of a pastel colour you could use for your final step and then still have room to jump to white. Or you could just, keep your model really cool by using a pastel blue all over it or something like that. Don't be scared about trying it out, and you can always do a little test on your palette first just to give it a go. Okay, this is probably, I think, the biggest issue that people had with the Slapchop technique when we put up our, do you have any problems post. And it's not an issue with the technique, it's an issue with the current, it's just contrast. And the problem is that all the contrasts are wildly different. Not a little bit different, but they are wildly different. Some are just like home run superstars. You've got Imperial Fist, which we used on our cabbage recently. You've got a couple of the turquoises are just absolutely incredible. Some of them just don't behave like you'd want them to though, and that can lead to a few issues. Actually, I'm gonna get some examples. Skeleton Hood, this is contrast. Wildwood, this is a contrast. Cassandora Yellow, this is a shade. In theory, it would be very convenient if all of the contrasts behaved pretty much identically and you put them over stuff and they did things at, the same vibrancy, the same degree of coverage, the same thickness or thinness, they're, how wet they are. Why have I forgotten the word? Consistency. I might have already used it. Anyway, it would be really convenient if they all behaved exactly the same. It would also be impossible. So if you've ever looked into the difficulties of making paints or anything like that, some colours behave some way and some colours behave another way. If you want to get a light colour to cover well, often you have to dump a load of black or white in it, and then that changes it, and putting that in may change its other properties, so you have to balance it out with something else. It's not very easy to make every single color you can think of act in the same way. Now, weirdly, a load of the recent contrasts behave exactly like shades. We've got Skeleton Horde here, and we've got Cassandora Yellow. They behave really similarly. Like, Skeleton Horde just basically seems to be a shade, to me. Wildwood doesn't seem to be a contrast, it seems to be an ink. Like, it is an incredibly strong, potent, very, very wet mix. And then, I've already banged on about it. My favorite, this behaves how I'd like every single contrast to behave. But not every single contrast behaves like this. So what can you do about this? If you have a contrast that isn't colorful enough for you or strong enough for you, there is absolutely nothing wrong with dumping a little bit of a strong or deep paint in there. So don't be worried about this. It's nothing to be scared of. Take a little bit of whatever color you have. Let's say you want to deepen a blue, and drop a bit of that into the contrast or shade that you're using. Just use the best behaving contrast or shade for the job that is the closest color, and either deal with the fact that it's not exactly the color you want, or drop a little bit of another color in it there, and that will get you to the color you want with a contrast that has the behavior you want. And I'd actually argue that the behavior is almost more important than the color, because you'll be able to get it close. Also, you'll end up having to buy less paints. You'll be able to drop a blue in your blue to make it stronger. If your brown isn't dark enough, you can just drop a little bit of black in. It's pretty easy, and if you mix it well, there's absolutely nothing to worry about, because the property of contrast is carried by the medium, not the paint. At this stage, I would just call everything transparent stuff, honestly. We've got contrasts that are actually behaving more like shades. We've got other brands that are bringing out equivalents or rip-offs of one or the other, but that behave like one or the other than the one that they originally intended. I know that sounds confusing. It's because it is. There's a lot of transparent paints out there. You know, there's mediums from other people. Let's just talk about transparent paints, because I have this that behaves like a contrast, this contrast that behaves like a shade, and then there's some shades that behave like contrasts. Quick tip, I'll grab one now. I should be able to show you. The contrasts that do this at the bottom, that's because they've had to dump some stuff in to try and get it to behave in a particular way. The ones that have really big deposits of normally a whitish or much whiter looking stuff in than they contain, this is Ultramarines Blue, that's because they've tried to get it to do pretty heavy duty coverage. They behave a little bit differently to the rest, and they tend to be quite strong. The ones that are a really, really pure dark color, Wildwood's a good example. There's also an extremely deep blue, forgot the name of it. They behave more like an ink. Just worth noting. So now we've got all of this information. What do we do with it? Like, what does this help us with? I've told you that you can't reliably pick a contrast and it'll behave exactly like anything else. You should do higher quality dry brushing. That will help. All your stuff will look better. You can use different colored base coats. That's just a cool thing that you can do. And that you should be willing to dump other bits of paints or make mixes to get the right color and the right properties working together to give you an easier time. Now, one thing that is one of the frequently voiced issues with the Slapchop technique is that stuff can look a bit chalky. We can fix that with the dry brushing, but also it can look chalky because there's a lot of white showing through, or a lot of not colorful stuff showing through. We're using transparent paints and we're only putting black, gray, and white under them. Obviously, we can change that if we change those paints. What can you do to help you get a more vibrant model? Probably noticed this guy is pretty vibrant, apart from his wings. I use 2 coats. That's it.
But it's so simple.
I still thin them a bit, and maybe my second coat should have been thinned a bit more actually. But what I would do is I'd put down 1 coat over your area carefully for the first coat, and then what that leaves open is a quick second coat, and that will just be like a filter. It doesn't need to be thick at all. Don't need to worry about it pulling in recesses, anything like that. And that will instantly go over the area and just pull it up in terms of vibrancy if it's a vibrant color. So if you want a deep red, a deep purple, or like a really, really striking green, something like that, the 2 coats is a really good way to do it. If they're thinned, you won't lose those raised areas being lighter at all, so there's no real downside, apart from the fact that you have to do 2 steps instead of 1. However, if you're only doing 1, you have to be really careful with it and go slower. So I would actually say that it's not like doubling the time, it's like 1.5 times or something like that. You can use a different color for the second coat as well. So if you're like, actually, I wanted that red to be more red, I did that. I used Flesh Terrors for the first one in a kind of blood mix. Then I added more Bale Red for the second one. you can use it to level things up, or you could choose a dark one and be like, actually, I want to push this towards the recesses. It gives you a lot more control. Changing the color or adding in another color to your second coat is probably the biggest single thing, apart from changing the base coat, that I would say is in this video in terms of increasing the quality of your miniatures. So let's say you are going for, segue into metallics, a cool steel, and you've got your base coat, you've done your grey dry brush, you've done your white, and then you've put a dark color over it to deepen the recesses. You're like, it doesn't look cold enough. You can just take a little bit of a blue wash or a contrast, dump it in with whatever your dark color was, let's say it's null oil or something, and that will cool it down in the second go. Really important thing to remember is whatever contrast is on top or wash is on top will dominate what was underneath. So if you want something to be striking, you know you're taking 2 steps, do the second one as the bit that you're looking to be the most striking. You can play with this to your advantage the other way around. If you're like, I want all of those rivets to be a lot darker, but I don't want them to look clumsy, you can clumsily dot them with any dark color, and then let's say it's gold, put your yellow wash over it, and that will be subtle way more than you would think, just because you've got another color on top of that. It softens it, it's really forgiving, and it's a wonderful way to be able to speed things up and do precise looking techniques without actually any need to be precise. So one thing that can go wrong with this technique is when you make a slip up or a mistake. The way that you order your parts of your model that you're doing in different colors is quite important. So what I would do is I would do darker areas first. Then if you make a mistake with them, you can even quickly get a dry brush in there and, you know, like stipple it up to gray or something like that. Let's say you've got like a deep blue here and you're going to a bright orange here. If you do bright orange first and you make a mistake, you can just paint black on top of it. So you could work in that order, but you will have to be careful with the black. If you do the black first and you go outside the lines, you can quickly stipple some gray on it, then do your orange. If the orange overspills onto the black, you'll barely notice. So the order that you approach things in, the sequencing, you can make your life a lot easier, a lot more forgiving, and a lot more enjoyable just by considering that before you start on the model. There's no way to get away from having to be neat though. With this technique, it's probably the only downside of it as a beginner technique. You have to paint inside the lines, but if you're using strong colors, you've got to be careful with that. Actually, I say that, there is one really good tip to get away with this stuff. You got an area here, you got an area here, you're going to put blue here and you're going to put yellow here. You put it down and some of your blue goes up here. If you quickly run like a null oil wash down here, what you'll get is you'll get a little null oil fade, pooling in the deepest point and then subtly fading out. It's the joy of washes as it gets further away from the bit where it's the deepest. Any wiggles you've got in this section are just going to be deleted by that. So you can actually do a little bit of black lining afterwards with something forgiving and fast that you can't really go wrong with, and that can delete mistakes. It's a good way to get away with it. This one came up a lot, and I think people just need to get over it. People are like, this technique isn't new. So what? Like, it's been used before under a different name. I think actually I would argue it is new. It's got its very own set of principles. Just because no one's named specifically this with contrast before, there's nothing wrong with it. Just get over it. Like, it's like en grisaille if you're gonna use fancy French terms, but the great thing about this technique is that it lowered the intimidation factor, and covering something in like techie French phrases is something that's going to intimidate everyone. And you know, I and quite a lot of other people aren't as artily or art history enough in terms of being informed to be able to handle that topic respectfully and appropriately. I do already feel more arty. Yeah. In a nutshell, if people are happy and enjoying painting more and getting their armies painted more as a result of something existing, I am fully down. Also, models are being designed far too complicated with far too many bits these days, and anywhere that makes that seem less intimidating and helps new people come into our wonderful hobby, 2 thumbs up from me. All right, theory is out of the way. We've got timestamps in the theory, we've got corresponding timestamps in the method, demonstration, practical, however you want to see it. So you can jump between as you find the most educational or useful. Let's jump in and see how I achieved this Bloodthirster. Worth noting, not everything went right first time. That's absolutely fine. We've left that in to show you what experimentation and fixing mistakes looks like. Let's go. Okay, so fairly unsurprisingly, I'm going to be using our dry brushes for this. I'll be going for the extra large for the first step, absolutely. Biggest brush possible. and we're going to be using the dampening pad. So if any of you are newer to the channel and you aren't aware of what the dampening pad is or does, or how we do our fancy dry brushing, we're going to use 1 drop of water from the back of whatever brush you're using. So extra large brush gives an extra large drop. We're going to work it in, and this is going to introduce a small amount of moisture to our brush throughout the technique. So this will help us keep our paint smoother, and the blends will be of a higher quality, and our dry brushing will be less chunky. I put 2 paints on my palette. I'm going to choose to use a warmer one here. So we've got a warm coloured base coat or undercoat on our model, and we're going to keep that going throughout here. Even though it says dark sea grey, it's not cold grey whatsoever. Vallejo or Citadel are definitely the brands that I would recommend doing this stage with. I would avoid any brands that are known as being matte because they're a little bit absorbent, and that does affect how contrast will go. So I'm going to take a small amount of paint from the end of it. We're not just going to plow our brush in, and we're going to remove quite a lot of it here. Now, because this isn't on a paper towel, we're removing moisture and pigment in proportion. We're just removing paint. We're not removing more moisture than anything else. So let's give this a go. So we've tested here, nothing bad should happen. And we can probably get away with using slightly more paint than that. So having tested on the palette, the idea is that we'll make mistakes there. You do want a fairly heavy amount of paint on the brush, but you don't want chunks of it anywhere. You don't want a particularly wet bit or anything like that. I always start in an area that I feel is safe, so I quite like the texture on the chest. We want a lot of paint there. We're going to do this now all over the model. Rather than going back for paint, every now and again we'll go back and we'll just get some more moisture. Maybe not dip it right in the paint, dip it in the bit of the palette where we've been getting the paint from, and this will stop us from caking up our brushes, and that will do a huge amount for increasing their life expectancy. If, for example, you want to keep the model warm like we have, you can always mix a little bit of your base coat color into just a neutral gray, and that will, of course, it'll give it the properties of whatever paint you used for your base coat. If you use circular dry brushing, you'll hit each part of your model from every single aspect and angle, and you should manage to get really high quality dry brushing like this, picking out details kind of universally rather than just from one direction. If you've got details that are all going in one direction like this, you want to go across the details, not traveling in a line with them. So these ones that are going horizontally, I want to be dry brushing vertically. And that will do a better job of picking them out. If ever in doubt though, circles. Circles are your friend. They'll hit everywhere equally. And I would keep kind of a medium pressure while you're doing this. I've picked the best model here. This model is so good. The texture on these wings is just absolutely incredible, especially. All right, I'll pop back in a bit and we'll have a fully grey model. Okay, so for the white. Now, there are a load of different approaches here. You could pick a off-white paint, an ivory. You could use a Citadel equivalent like Screaming Skull, Wraithbone, Morghast Bone, something like that, anything bony. You could use an almost white, very light grey. That could be Ulth1, Blue Horror, if you're going for something cool, anything like that, anything really bright and pastel-y. We're just going to go for a bold white at this stage though. If we were kind of looking to keep things really warm, you could even use a colour like the favourite Ice Yellow from Vallejo. Either I'm going to stick with Vallejo and I'm going to use just normal white. Nice thin line there. We want to make it easier to take a small bit off the palette with a dry brush. 1 drop of water in the dampening pad. Okay, now this is way easier and it is way faster. As long as you do a little bit of testing on your palette, you should pretty much have no issues. And this white is going to kind of bite and jump, as we've seen on the texture palette, onto our model super easily on the raised areas. So once we've tested it a bit there, it's just as we were all over. The camera's probably going to make this look a little bit more extreme than it is in real life, but no, we're still looking good. So all these edges here, again, remember the direction of your strokes. If I want to catch these, here you go, I'll show you me doing it wrong on purpose. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Maybe I'll catch, these bits running this way. If I want to catch them, you have to run against the details. And again, if in doubt, and just generally always, we're going to do gentle buffing. That's going to pick it all out. Take your time here, it will go pretty fast anyway. And yeah, make sure that you don't put any great big splodges down. We had a couple with our base coat. You really don't want those with this, and it's going to go really quick anyway, so don't rush it. The one thing that I am going to try and do with the white is I'm trying to put more on the upwards facing areas. Really easy to work out. Take your model, look at it from above. The bits you can see, that's them. So this is trying to mimic an airbrushing technique. I will link a couple of pretty good videos below, which are talking about involving zenithal airbrushing generally with the Slapchop technique and how it works out really well. We're doing that, but you know, we're not even using an airbrush. So I've got a heavier coat than I have had of the white. I'm going to start pretty gently, but we're just hitting those upwards facing areas. Now, keep it gentle and don't just blindly follow and repeat, because if on this one I was going to go, as I get to here, those noises were necessary, obviously. As I get to here, this isn't an upwards facing area anymore. This is an upwards facing area. So for this section, it's that bit. It's not all the way down the side. Another way to do this is you can just go from top to bottom. And if we go to our dampening pad here, get a bit of moisture, be careful with this, work it off. So I've got diluted paint in my brush now, it's got more water in it. You can actually just specifically buff in there and stipple things. It's up to you, whichever way you want to approach it, go for it, whichever one works the best for the area in question, given what I've just explained. It's looking really good. I am super pleased with this. That's very high quality dry brushing, looks great. I'm quite scared, so I'm gonna hit the inner upwards facing areas, the wings, with some more white, and then we're gonna start putting some contrast on it. I am scared. Oh well. It's a little bit heavy. First major mistake there. Now, because we hit these areas with the gray beforehand, this is gonna land in them like kind of okay without jumping out too much. And this one I'll just go from top to bottom. Maybe hit this bit, that's the bit that's sticking out from the top. Back for more moisture again. We're diluting our paint here. Whatever we've done, we've put water in it, so it's less strong than it was. That means it's going to be less opaque, a little bit softer, and it lets you do this kind of smudgy, buffy, I don't know, if I did makeup, I guess I'd be able to describe this better than I am currently. Okay, no more excuses. Okay, he's looking great. Let's go. I have no idea whether this bit's going to make its way into the video, but we'll see. So, I've got Flesh Terrors red and I've got Blood Angels red here. We're going to go classic for Billy, but like I have mentioned, I'm a little bit scared. So first thing that I'm going to do is we've got a brilliant place to test how things are going to go here on our palette. Oh my God, that's strong. That's Flesh Terrors red. That is unbelievably strong. So let's go for roughly 50-50. The contrast medium. This is making it more like a shade here, but the contrasts and shades are so unbelievably close together and confused these days. It's almost difficult to talk about them. Okay, so that's a bit better. I think what we're going to have to do is we're just going to have to go to a bit of the wing and, you know, like a hidden bit. And we'll see how this goes. Test where nobody can see. It's looking pretty good, actually. I'm going to try a barely diluted one next to it. I can smudge this out. This is going to go... Oh, it's a lot deeper. Okay. I think I probably want like a 2-to-1 ratio. One big contrast. That's probably about 50-50. And here, it's probably it. I wonder if I want some purple in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make that wet. Takes a while to dry, so don't fear. Your mistakes are, until they're locked in, mistakes with contrast are very semi-permanent. Okay, experimentation continues. I really like this colour. So it's the shade Caribou Crimson. It's quite strong by shade standards. Ooh, you know, it brings like kind of like a slightly disgusting brown, purpley, dark warmth to colours and just makes him look a bit more like blood. We'll try under his other wing. See some of the fluff in there. Okay. More armpit shading. Oh, that's disgusting. Okay. I think we have our mix. Roughly. So let's make that up in a proper quantity after doing this section here. Now, I'm not using the contrast too thin, but if you're worried, the one thing is to not let it pool. If you are worried, you can just do 2 thin coats. It's absolutely fine. And if you're more comfortable with that, then that's the way to do it. Especially if it's on, you know, a big centerpiece or more. There is absolutely nothing wrong with taking your time a little bit more with this step, as it's a very important step. Oh dear, I didn't think about what we're doing with the hair. Damn it. Okay, I'm going to continue painting this section. I need to get some artwork up. I don't know what I'm doing here. I've got like red blindness and I've only thought about the really obvious bits of the model. There's a lot more to this model than just the red fleshy bits, so I need to kind of think about that now. We've already hit a bony bit, etc. So how we're doing those, and oh, that's going to look good. That's going to look great. How we're doing those and in what order I need to consider before we do this properly. We're going to use this paint a fair bit. I have a bottle. Let's get it right in a way that we don't have to make it again, or we get inconsistencies in mixes or anything like that. So we can probably eyeball this. Decent amount of contrast medium. Oh God, this is scarier to pour than contrast medium. Go for long pour. That went better than expected. It's a lot more consequential pulling that out by your teeth when the bottle's full rather than empty. Okay, and then how much of the Caribou Crimson do we put in? I feel like that's enough to tint it a bit. It's not super strong. There you go. Hopefully that's right. It would be very fortuitous for it to be right first go. I don't expect it to be right first go at all. We've got enough room left inside, it's going up to about here, to be able to fix any mistakes. Oh, okay. It looks pretty similar actually. Sounds a bit more bloody. Basically, I don't want to have to dilute it once I'm rocking and rolling, so I'd like something that is as close as possible to what I want to use. I think the last one might have been too diluted, so that maybe leaves us some wiggle room. Just need to get it over white in one place. Let's go for one of his blobs of lower back muscles. If it's a bit darker than we want, that should be okay, because these ones we'd want darker. That's a disgusting colour. We might be okay, because that's really gruesome. I'm really not used to being neat with this stage. Normally I'm doing this and then I'm fully overbrushing anything that's around it, or I'm undercoating it separately. But this is not as forgiving as I'm used to with the delicate steps here. Wow, that's a great colour. That's really good. Okay, we're rocking and rolling. So just going to smudge that bit out there. And we'll worry about the rest later. I'll feather it out a bit with a brush that's just got water on it. End it in a crease. And against the detail like a vein. And yeah, we should be good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to be using this colour throughout to keep the piece coherent. So basically whatever we do, if relevant, we'll drop a little bit into that. Maybe we wouldn't on, say, the bone areas, but for example, on his fluffy bits, we're going to be using a mix of Black Legion and Magos Purple. I've got some of this on my palette already, but I'll show you how I go about it. So one, if you're trying to get the ratios replicable, rinse your brush thoroughly and kind of dry it off a little bit between each scoop. You'll get a more relevant comparison then. So the Black Legion's way stronger, so we're probably going to need a much higher ratio of the purple. So that's 2 purple, 1 Black Legion. You could even use less Black Legion, and then to that we'll just drop a blob. That'll pull in with the rest of our paint job, and hopefully this works okay. So I won't go straight in there with his mane, whatever you call it. I'll go for this little tufty bit here. Wow, that's weaker than I expected. This is the problem with the contrasts currently as they are. Yeah, we need something that is stronger everywhere, not just in the recesses. So maybe we do, in fact, go for a bit more of the Black Legion. Ugh, scary. And take 2. Yeah, okay, that's better. We can work with that. Okay, so I'm going to go all over and we're going to do the black details. We'll do all the details that aren't like metallics or the red, which is the main body. The reason for that is we want the red to cover over any of the mistakes from these sections. So, you know, we shouldn't rush them and try and get them wrong. But if we do get these wrong, it isn't the end of the world. It's quite unforgiving, this type of detail. This will be one of the weaker areas of the model, but you know, we're still trying to get it done fast, so we just have to accept that some bits aren't going to be, you know, like award-winning. So in areas like this mohawk main thing, we're going to be using it pretty thin like a glaze, and that's just because we don't want it pooling towards the bottom. I'll also be working from the bottom to the top, and I'll go pretty slow. If I need to do this twice, that's fine. One of the reasons to use a decent brush for everything, even contrasting and base coating, is the little bits of control that you might be able to make use of. So here I've got a difficult area where, you know, there's some fluff mixed in with flesh, and if I've got a nice pointy brush, the bits that I'm not sure about, I'll start with the point of the brush, and it's going to look more like it's hair. So even though I'm kind of overspilling the detail onto an area that's probably muscle, the fact that it's done in the same shape as the hair is going to let me kind of fade it in a little bit more, and it'll let me get away with not actually specifically knowing or picking out exactly where the hair is. If this was a paint rather than something that's like a wash, it's a bit easier to do, but as it is, I'm just going to fairly boldly paint some stripes on it. And yeah, because we're using a decent quality brush that's holding a lot of paint, we can get away with that. There we go. So it's worked particularly well on those bits, I think, because the strokes are kind of easy to follow there, but really glad because they were going to stand out quite badly if we did cock them up. My palette is looking brutal. So what we are doing is we're putting down our first coat, which kind of looks like this, and then our second coat is just the first coat, and in it we've dropped a little bit of a slightly more reddy red. In this instance, it's Blood Angels red. It's just like a 1 Blood Angels red to 2 or 3 of our original mix. And with this, you can mix it really thin, take a fair bit off the brush, and you're just using it as a glaze. So one quick pass without any need for pulling or anything is all that's needed here, and it will basically filter the section in question. So let's have a little look here, what that would look like. So we've done this one. Hopefully you can see that one standing out as a bit deeper, but let's go over this. These details are a little bit fiddly, so I'll just do the top section of one of them. So the moment that second coat's down, even if it's incredibly thin, you get this huge uplift in vibrancy, and that's how you keep vibrant colors in your highlights. You know, you could do one coat of things thicker, but if you do, you're still going to get it pulling off the tops, off the raised areas. Whereas if you do 2 thin coats, and like in this instance, we've used a more vibrant color for the second one because we're thinking more about things overall than, you know, necessarily pulling in the recesses, you get a much deeper, it's kind of like a more, in this case, it's like a more winey, deep, unctuous red. Particularly important if you don't want your raised areas to look a little bit desaturated. So we're just trying to bring some color in, some vibrancy in. Contrast can do that, but it's quite difficult to get them to do that in one coat Also, if you do 2 coats, neither of them needs to be perfect, whereas if you do 1, it kind of does need to be perfect. So yeah, that second coat is going to go all over the Mini, and that's really just going to ramp things up, and he should look pretty badass. Okay, so leather. Now, I had a bit of a difficulty here because I want something that's going to show up the work that we've got from the fancy dry brushing, but also is going to be dark enough. And because we're doing gold, which is just currently Iyanden and a little bit of our blood mix, I didn't want something that was too similar kind of tonally to that. So what we've got, just with everything, we found something that works, and then we've dumped a little bit of our blood mix in it. And what that's ended up with is kind of like a slightly more, I guess it's a more chestnutty version of the colour that we'd have. So next to the gold, this is way deeper and it's going to stand out. And it's also quite a nice mix to use in a kind of thin way. It's very, very strong. I would absolutely describe this as more of an ink feel as far as the contrasts go. So go steady with it and be ready to mop up any slips. It does really punch out next to that gold though, which is great. And because we're putting it over a brown base coat rather than a black one, we're getting a little bit more of the warmth of it, and even the mid-tones are kind of, you know, they're just that little bit more warm, and they've got a bit more kind of value to them. While I'm here, and this is why we should use a brush that can get a bit of a tip on it, I'm actually just going to make use of this darker mix to exaggerate some details in the gold areas. So that'll be dotting the eyes of the skulls, dotting the nose if we can get away with it, just about, and drawing down these lines down the Khorne symbols here. This is really going to help. I know it's going to take a bit more time, but the gold's going to pop out in comparison to the rest of the model. It really will. So it's worth giving that bit more love than the areas that are going to kind of fall to the background. This is front and center, literally. For details like this, I'll just go over it normally, but then I'm going to dump a wash specifically in the little Khorne symbols on it. So we're going to get a lot of the work done by the contrast mix that we're using anyway, just the normal leather one. But if we've got details like that, I really do want to have the opportunity to exaggerate them. Anywhere with really good texture that's going to make it kind of easy and approachable for you to customize it a little bit further, I'd say is worth doing. If it's one more step, that's fine. If it's going to take 2 more steps, then maybe you need to think about it more carefully. If you are going for speed, of course. If you're just going for trying something cool, or it's a character model, or you're happy to take a bit more time, then do whatever you need to make yourself happy with the bit that you're painting, or enjoy it. You know, painting's meant to be enjoyable, right? So for this section here, around the gold on the belt, I want this to really stand out. Now I want it to stand out as bright and gold, and part of being gold is being, you know, yellow and warm. So what I've done is I've taken some of the Black Legion and I've dumped a little bit of the red in because we're putting the red in with everything, but I've put a tiny bit of Pterodon turquoise in there. So this is a bluey black. I'm going to have to be very careful with this, so I'll hold my breath. But what we're going to do is we're going to put this in the recesses of the belt. Now, because it's cool, it being right next to something warm should hopefully have the effect that the yellow jumps out as even warmer without us doing anything to the yellow. So this is a really neat trick. Kind of had this with the wings. They just look like neutral warm, but the moment we put red next to them, the white kind of looks a little bit bluey and a bit cool, and it's just because it's next to something that is, you know, is a really extreme variant of warm or cold in one way or the other. So yeah, I'm going to take my time here. I might even drop down below this brush that I've been using for absolutely everything so far. And we're going to use that. It'll also further define the details, make them look more crisp. So absolutely worth doing. I could probably save time by using a smaller brush here. I'm just being stubborn. I want to do the entire thing with one brush. That is helping. It's looking great. Time to see some fancy gold hacking in action. So this has just been hit with Iyanden, contrast with a tiny bit of our blood mix in it. Then I've dry brushed it again with white. Now what we're going to do is going to take a little bit more Iyanden. And we're going to put slightly more proportionally of our red mix in it. Grab a little bit of water. Okay. See how that's behaving on the back of my hand. We're going to dot this around anything that is a detail and kind of in the middle. You can always check out one of GW's zoomed in pictures of the details like this if in doubt, but what I'm thinking basically is we're going to dot it around rivets because the rivets are super bright, so we'll have some nice contrast there, and then we're just going to sneak it into other areas we think may need attention. For these, I'm doing that in the middle. The reason for that is all my dry brushing is going to hit that outside, so I'm going to have them kind of darker in the middle, lighter towards the edges. So that is step one. One quick hairdry later. So step two, this is the same brush. Get more water, and I'm going to dilute it loads. So you can do this pretty much all at the same time. This then gets glazed all over. It's a lot softer. And then what we do is we drop a final scary mix with much higher proportion of the red. On those key details again. So this is super deep and chestnutty. You don't have to be delicate with this at all because we're going to hit it with a last quick dry brush at the end. So any of the edges it covers, it's just not a worry. Kind of blobbing it in the middle, towards the middle, around those rivets. So, you know, it looks like a small area that I'm covering, but I'm not being required to be neat, you know, not neat whatsoever. If I was doing it on these sections, I just do it in exactly the same way. Blob it in areas that I think I would like to look a little bit deeper. That's it. So you're covering small areas with little dabs, but you know, it's literally 5 seconds work and you can't cook it up. You could use an ivory here if you wanted as well. If you didn't want to go all the way to white, up to you. And then just kind of from one direction, I'll lightly hit these. That's going to pick out all the rivets. Done. Non-metallic gold with contrast. All right, so not only is my desk getting more and more chaotic and gruesome looking, but we've just made a big mistake. So if you're new to the channel, we don't get things perfect all the time. Not at all, not even close. So I just put down a kind of warm, yellowy, peachy blood red wash on the wings, and it just didn't work. These 3 sections, I quickly got in there with a cloth. This is like a glasses wiping cloth. I usually use it for streaking grime, but it doesn't leave any fluff behind. So I managed to wipe it off in a way that won't leave any fibers on it. And yeah, basically, I think I want to keep a lot of the details on these wings. So we're going to use something that's a lot closer to a shade. Then in contrast, like what's there is good already. We're kind of cool and down with that. I'm going to keep it cool as well, literally. So we're going to start off with Drakenhof Nightshade. I'll pop a little bit of our blood mix in while I've got a small amount of it in there and see how much and how aggressively it tints the color. I would like to have a bit in there, but it might be a bit strong. I reckon we're okay with that. Okay, cool. So obviously this is a shade. Shades are not contrasts. They're a lot wetter. They are more likely to run, which is going to be a bad thing if we get any streaking or anything like that. So we're going to have to use this quite carefully. My Drakenhof just feels like really wet. Anyway, let's put a little bit of our blood mix in there. Let's put too much of our blood mix in there. It might have even been better just using a contrast medium as a base and putting some paint in it. All right. Right, we're going to test this somewhere safe, which is in these areas behind him where we've tested loads of other stuff so far. I think we are good with that, so that's what we're going to go with now. It's fine to make mistakes, peeps. It happens. Sometimes you can fix them, sometimes you can't. When you can, count your blessings, on the subject of which. Let's put some contrast medium in here to keep it workable. That will also comparatively thicken it up, which at this stage is a good thing. So if I have to do this twice, I'm fine with that. I like the level of details we've got on the wings anyway. I could use a bigger brush here, and generally I'm a massive proponent of using a bigger brush, but I don't want to be able to hold too much and therefore put down too much. So I'm trying to make sure I don't go too fast, basically. Using a 2 or a 3 here. Normally I'd use like a 4 or a 5, but a 2 or a 3 is fine. And I'm going to be putting down the wash and then just working from that original point where the wash was as a well, instead of going to my palette, removing any fluff.
And we're going to carry on working from that until we can barely get any from it. That's just going to encourage us to not oversaturate and end up with drippy pooling anywhere. It's a key area of the model. It's like our main area of interest is these badass wings. They've got awesome texture on them. So we're just trying to keep as much of that as possible and not ruin things, because we've already done that once. Another top tip is to keep your model at the same orientation. Don't tip it this way and that, because if you do have pooling, you'd rather have it in one place and then let it dry than have it kind of like half in one area, then in another one. That's much better. We're keeping a load of the detail that we've got on there. I'm so much more happy with that. I'm really, really glad that I decided to delete the last one, even if it was a bit of a risk. You can always change plan, guys. You can always do it. Whether it's repainting or something, there's always an option. I am doing one particularly magic step, I would say, here. And what that is we're taking the mix that we used on the wings, which is just Drakenhof Nightshade with a little bit of our blood added. So it's staying a little bit coherent with the kind of aesthetic that we've got going on. You can dilute that as much as you want. That could be with water, it could be with contrast medium, you know, whatever you are the most comfortable with, whatever makes you worry the least, that is the right option. So I'll take a little bit of contrast medium because I imagine that's what people will go for. Now, we washed this thin all over the wings, turned out pretty well. What we are doing now is, because I think I've lost a bit of depth in the red areas, probably because my second wash maybe should have been more dilute, something like that. This is really easy. You just blob it in the recesses. Dilute a bit more with water there. It's super easy. I mean, look how little care I am taking here. And what we're getting here is all those little wrinkles and the wonderful details on the model have been sculpted. We're getting more out of them, and it stands out without looking too obnoxious because it's not massively opaque. Now the winner bit is, obviously this is a bit more of a delicate technique, you know, you're not just blobbing it all over, but it's very forgiving, it's hard to go wrong. I'm just pushing it against the veins. So you could just push it from underneath if you want to suggest, you know, kind of lighting, or you could go underneath and over the top if you want to bring attention to them in general. But yeah, look how well it's worked there. This is the same mix that I've used just to blend his skeleton horde bony bits with his head. It's really easy. It's incredibly easy. You could do it on veins. I've used this wash basically everywhere that I would like to distinguish one bit from another. And if I've slipped in the process of painting, I did a little bit on these, for example, you can use this just like you'd use a black wash, push it against there, and it'll hide your mistakes. It's wonderful. It's so good. It really does make a massive difference. And it's not something that people need to worry about, even if you get it on like a big bit of muscle or something. You can just wipe it off. Or if you left it there, it probably wouldn't even matter that much. So yeah, it's worked wonders. He's looking badass. So I appreciate people may want to see this technique start to finish with the gold. So here we go. Right, we've got some Yandin. I'm going to take a tiny bit of our red. This is just the blood red that we're using everywhere. Mix it with that. We take a detail that's been painted in exactly the same way as everything else on the model has. We literally slap it on. Now what you want to do is pull it against a few details like rivets and some of your strokes there, and it will dump a heavier drop of paint in those areas. So just get it all over normally and then pick a couple of key aspects. Make sure that you've got it pushed up against them. So for me, that's wanting to have quite a bit in the middle of the Khorne symbol, and then quite a bit on the bottoms. So you've got the middle is a bit lacking there. That's step one, pretty normal. It's just slapping it on, but with a little bit more thought at the end. Let it dry fully, and we'll come back to it for step two. So step two is super simple. Take your Yandin again. This time mix it with more red. Test it next to where you tested the last one. That's darker, we're good. Those areas where it pulled, push towards them. You know, you might have chosen these areas, that's okay. Take the same brush, rinse pretty much all of it off in water, just leaving a hint like that. Again, test it, should be a much softer version. but still that darker color, you're then going to use this all over again. Grab yourself a dry brush. You can use white or ivory for this. I'll show you with an ivory. If you use an ivory or a bone, that leaves you room for white if you wanted to. Hey presto, magic gold. It's pretty convincing as well. I mean, considering it's a 4-step contrast process. So yeah, that's it. You could dot the rivets back as well if you wanted, or any other dark color, or even purple. And if you want to see the same cheaty NMM approach, this has had nothing but the wash that's been put over it twice. This bottom detail, it should be catching light on this edge, so we're just going to try and give it a quick white dry brush there, and then I'm going to try and catch the edges of the other areas. Same on the skulls, and it should suggest that they're shiny.
All right, we are done. That was a big one, wasn't it? So if you are new to the channel, please do us a Christmas favor and consider subscribing. Drop a like, drop a comment, and drop a comment with a suggestion for the best follow-up video to this topic. So you've seen all of this. We've got the theory, we've got the demonstration. You can jump between the corresponding sections to see us explaining it, why you're doing it, and then show us how you're doing it. Also our mistakes, which we do tend to include in this channel. I think they're important. So what would be the ideal follow-up? The best suggestion, we will give a brush set of your choosing and a texture palette of your choosing, even up to the extra, extra large. So yeah, let us know what would be a great follow-up. Is it stippling? Is it flat areas? Would you like to see what I would add to the Bloodthirster, like kind of post Slapchop? I was very tempted to dry brush him up a little, but apart from the eyes, I haven't really done anywhere. Just put a little bit of orange around there. So it is kind of true to Slapchop. Do you want to see us airbrush with it? We will take the most liked comment from all of you. So go down and vote, even if you don't have a suggestion, and that person will receive a prize, and we'll make that video. Plenty more coming in 2023. We've got a rather tasty Necron Lord. We've got Demon Prince. You can see him kind of shadowy there. He looks like dad and son, doesn't it? Yeah, plenty more content of this type coming up for 2023. Let us know what you thought of the different format, if it was too much, if it was too little, if you hated it, if you loved it, if you have any constructive feedback about the editing or anything like that. We are all ears, and I guess that's it. So please drop us a sub, drop us a comment, drop us a suggestion, and I'm gonna head off and enjoy some mulled wine and maybe put the Christmas jumpers to bed. No, I'm not. I love Christmas jumpers all year round. I do live in the UK. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. Merry Christmas.